The Atlanta Braves took down the Los Angeles Dodgers 2-1 in their weekend series, but all that we can kind of think about right now is the loss of Bobby Cox. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today, a production of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com, as well as the host of this here show. I want to get to the injury updates from the weekend. There's surprisingly a couple of them that we need to talk about. I want to talk about that series in LA in general. What went right for the Braves, what went wrong, and some thoughts coming out of that. But before we do that, the Braves, for the second time in a week, just a lot of tragedy for Atlanta in dealing with the loss of Bobby Cox, who passed away on Saturday at the age of 84. It's really hard to fully talk about what Bobby Cox meant to the organization, what he meant to the city of Atlanta. We saw the outpouring of support from every single place, right? Other Atlanta sports teams, other Major League Baseball franchises, the league itself. The Dodgers did a really nice thing where they held a moment of silence for Ted Turner and Bobby Cox ahead of Saturday's game. And it ended up, as I understand it, a lot of that was orchestrated by president of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Stan Kasten. He was previously the president of the Atlanta Braves. He's been, in the past, he was general manager of the Hawks. He was president of the Thrashers. He was really close with Ted Turner for a long time, going back to like 1979 or so. And so, like, he's the one that kind of pushed some of this. He's a part owner of the team. I don't necessarily think it's a ton, but he's connected to Atlanta. He's connected to Ted Turner, and that's where this all came from. But it's tough. Like, as a kid, I was born in the mid-'80s. So, I was literally very, very young in formative years when Dale Murphy was patrolling the outfield. And I want to point out there, the person who moved Dale Murphy from catcher to the outfield, to center field, was Bobby Cox. But obviously some of my the most impressionable years for me when it comes to baseball, I always, I always think about how that age 9, 10 through 16 kind of time frame, the way that your team, like the team that you attach to during that age, and a little bit younger sometimes, but like during that age, that's the most formative time for you in baseball. And I was 11 years old, technically I was about to turn 11, when the Braves won in 95. And all of that was Bobby Cox. And so it kind of hits a little different when this happens. The thing that I've noticed, like, I never met Bobby Cox. I haven't been covering the Braves that, for that long. And so the thing that I keep thinking about when it comes to Bobby Cox, other than the figure that I saw on television every day, is how every single guy that was part of those teams that has spoken publicly about Bobby Cox, whether it's, the big three and Glavine, Smoltz. I actually haven't seen Maddox's comments yet, but Glavine and Smoltz, Chipper Jones, Brian McCann, Dale Murphy, all of the Braves legends who have spoken at length about Bobby Cox, is how he always, even if you were wrong, how he always had their backs. And part of the reason he's been thrown out a league record and probably untouchable record 162 times in his career is because he had their backs no matter what. He was, I'm not going to say a player's coach from the perspective of what we sometimes negatively think of as a player's coach, right? Where a guy will let things slide, where a manager will be buddy-buddy with them. No, he was the authority figure. He was the leader. But he was a player's coach in the perspective that he supported his guys, he believed in his guys, and he let them know that. And something I feel like is missed too much in baseball discourse in a data-driven game is how hard it is. And the amount of, I'm going to go with mental fortitude required to play baseball versus some other sports, I think is probably higher because it's a game built on failure. And all of the comments that I've heard from over the weekend, and the Braves Vision broadcast did a great job of talking about what they heard, talking about giving their own stories, giving stories from other guys, and all of this stuff is just about how much Bobby Cox supported them and helped them believe in themselves and did everything that had to be done to let them be successful. I'm not saying he was perfect, far from it. There's a whole domestic abuse situation in 2016 that a lot of Braves fans don't even know about. And when you go back and you look at it now with the benefit of hindsight, the way that it was handled, I'm sorry, I said 2016, back in 1995, sorry, domestic violence incident from back from 1995, that when you go back and you look at the way it was handled, it's embarrassing how badly the league handled it, how badly the Braves handled it, how badly the media handled it. And some of this is it's a different time, but when you look at it now with the benefit of where we are as a society, and you look at what happened there, the statements, the press conference, him sitting next to her and him putting blame on her for the whole situation, it's awful. No, he's not a perfect man. But I do think that the impact, the positive impact that he ended up having on the organization, on the city, on baseball as a whole is going to be hard to match. And there's so many little small things that you can, even now, you can go back and you can say like, hey, this is because of Bobby Cox. I learned over the weekend, Brian Snitker didn't know Walt Weiss. He did not know Walt. He had met him before, but there was no pre-existing relationship there when Brian Snitker hired Walt Weiss to be his bench coach. Do you know why he hired Walt Weiss to be his bench coach? Bobby Cox told him to. Bobby Cox vouched for Walt Weiss and said, I think this would be a really good fit for you for your coaching staff. And so, out of respect to Bobby Cox, Brian Snitker met with Walt Weiss. They clicked. He hired him, and now Walt Weiss is the manager of the Braves, and that probably doesn't happen if not for Bobby Cox. Like, it's not just in that stretch in the 90s and 2000s that Bobby Cox had impact on the organization. He still does now. I don't know. I haven't seen anything about what the plans are for the rest of this season to honor Ted Turner, to honor Bobby Cox. I imagine this first game back in Truist Park on Tuesday, you're going to see everything from, you might see a number 6 carved in the grass. I think that'd be a nice little gesture to make. I personally think they should probably wear the City Connects all week. The Ted Turner era City Connects all week. They should, they'll probably end up doing something in the grass. I've seen people suggest that, Bobby Cox Field at Truist Park. I don't know if that's going to happen. Fun fact, I worked for Truist during that merger. So I had been a BB&T employee when they merged with SunTrust to make Truist. And I was talking to a member of the executive team a couple weeks after the merger in person. And I pitched at that time. It wasn't baseball season yet. I think it was and the park was still named SunTrust Park, but it was going to be changed. And I pitched in front of 50 or whatever 60 employees, I pitched Hank Aaron Field at Truist Park to them, and they said no. So that's not necessarily a Truist decision, right? I was trying to get them to suggest that to the Braves, but I do think Bobby Cox Field at Truist Park, I would understand if they push something like that now. But either way, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do at home to honor Bobby. It's going to be really interesting. And it's going to be, there's a weird now energy for the rest of this season, right? There was a lot of talk on Saturday, win this one for Bobby. They won this game for Bobby. And I wonder, selfishly, going through the rest of the season, what kind of lingering impact this is going to have on the roster. Because, the hard thing to acknowledge here, most of the guys on that current roster didn't know Bobby Cox. They didn't play for Bobby Cox. They don't know Bobby Cox. They never got to experience his wisdom. He had that stroke that took away his ability to speak. And so most of these guys, they know who he is. They watched him growing up as manager of the Braves, but they don't know him. But I do think that we've seen the impact that he had was massive. And hopefully the public outpouring of support can be something that helps his wife Pamela, his kids, his grandkids, and everybody who was close to him. In just a minute, let's talk about that series that Atlanta won. Let's talk about the offense on the road trip in general. Let's talk about the rotation, the great start from Spencer Strider and Bryce Elder, and some of the injury updates. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. This episode's brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom coffees are the delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack's a great way to try all of the IQ Bar products and flavors. You get 9 IQ bars, 8 IQ Mix sticks, and 4 IQ Joe sticks. All IQ Bar products are clean label certified and entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. With over 20,000 5-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are fueling their busy lifestyle with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom-infused coffees. Their Ultimate Sampler Pack includes all 3. And right now, IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners 20% off of all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64,000. That's MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. The Atlanta Braves took down the Los Angeles Dodgers over the weekend, 2-1. And simultaneously, a really good series and a slightly frustrating series. Because the Braves very, very well could have won all 3 games, right? In game 1 on Friday night, they out-hit the Dodgers. They had, plenty of hard-hit batted balls, but the issue that Atlanta had was they went 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position. And for the most part, this is kind of a fluky thing, right? And some of that is the sample size. When you look at how a guy, it's hard to realistically draw conclusions over how a guy is performing in 25 to 40 at-bats with a runner in scoring position. It's just such a small sample size, right? Okay, here we go. Ozzie Albies is hitting .389 with runners in scoring position this year. He has a .947 OPS, 36 at-bats. There's no other scenario with which we would look at 36 at-bats and say we can meaningfully draw a conclusion there. Now, I do think you can overall be decent or not decent at that specific scenario based on your approach in that situation. Like Mauricio Dubon, we've talked about this a little bit before, and we saw it again come up on Sunday. Mauricio Dubon, when there's runners in scoring position, he is very aggressive at not being aggressive at the plate. I'm sorry, let me word that differently. He's very aggressive at not trying to do too much and just getting the ball into play. There we go. He's not swinging for the fences. He's not trying to drive all those guys in. And, in fact, he does have a couple extra base hits. He doesn't have a single home run with runners in scoring position this year. But he's hitting .308 because if the pitch is anywhere around the strike zone, if it's up, if it's outside, if it's inside, whatever, he's going to prioritize getting a bat on that ball and putting it into play and making the defense make a play. We've seen him, get a fastball off the plate away and he shoots it down the line opposite field for a double. We saw him on Sunday. I forget where the pitch was on Sunday. I believe it was somewhere kind of inner third or inside. And he gets the barrel on it and he pulls it down the line. And 3 runs come in to score. That's right. Because it was Jorge Mateo on first, and he just hit the Jets and came in to score without a throw because the dude's incredibly fast. So I do think you can have an approach that is conducive to getting opportunities to drive runners in with runners in scoring position, but it's hard for us to meaningfully come up with a good determination of your true skill level in that scenario. And I think Monday, you saw plenty of guys. There were strikeouts. There were guys who didn't even do it, but there were guys who put balls into play and they just happened to find gloves. So Atlanta goes 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position. They lose that game, even though, again, they out-hit. The batted ball quality, all of that was better than what Los Angeles did. And then on Saturday and Sunday, they win 7-2. And it was, I'd argue, not even as close as it sounded because Atlanta got a great start from Spencer Strider and a great start from Bryce Elder. Yes, Elder got into a little bit of trouble there in the 6th, walked 3 guys on 13 total pitches, but just kind of a dominant outing from both guys. And so where I am here is, 1, the road trip was fantastic. Atlanta goes 6-3. They score 51 runs. They put up 14 home runs. But the way that they did it, Chris Sale is just absolutely dominant. He is Chris Sale on Friday, right? Spencer Strider on Saturday is the closest to Spencer Strider that we've seen since he got hurt. And I know that you guys are wanting a super deep dive into Spencer Strider and what he did. I will say, if you go to bravestoday.com under the game coverage section, today's 3 things from Saturday, I kind of went into detail on the metrics of his fastball and all of that. But suffice to say, this is, from a shape of his pitch, from his velocity, from his usage of everything, this is the best we've seen Strider since 2023. He's not the 2023 Spencer Strider. Let's be clear. He is still not that guy. But he's a lot closer to it than he was last year. And knowing that he talked in spring about working so that he could peak later in the year as they're getting to the postseason, it's safe to assume that there could be more in the tank for Strider, and he could be in that 2023 form by the postseason. But I'm also currently now at the point where I'm thinking, okay, for the first time this season, the first time in 2026, I'm starting to believe that Atlanta has 3 postseason caliber starters in the rotation at the same time. Chris Sale goes without saying. We all know who Chris Sale is. He got through that outing a surprising 5 hits allowed, 2 earned runs, 7 innings, no walks, 7 strikeouts. Did give up 1 homer to Freddie Freeman and a little bit of I'm going to say, not rocky 6th inning. He gave up runs in both the 5th and the 6th, but I don't remember it being particularly bad, right? There was a throwing error by Jim Jarvis in the bottom of the 5th, and then Ohtani singled in Rojas. and then the Freeman solo shot. But Chris Sale is Chris Sale. You'd throw him in game 1 of any series, you don't worry about it. But the version of Strider we saw on Saturday, 1 hit, no runs, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts in 6 innings, that is absolutely a number 2 starter in the postseason, and you don't worry about it. You're like, yeah, we got him. We're good. Let's go. And then the version of Bryce Elder that we saw on Sunday. Yes, he did have the 3 walks in that 6th inning before they pulled him. And shout out to Robert Suarez. Bigger shout out to Eli White for making the play, and we're going to talk about that in the injury update in a second. But 5 2/3 for Elder. 1 hit, no runs, 4 walks. Again, 3 of those came in that 6th inning. 8 strikeouts. That's you're playing a 5-game series. That's games 1, 2, and 3 right there. And then because of the way MLB builds in the rest in this, you can probably get Sale back for game 4. Maybe you want to give Sale extra rest. And so you throw Elder in game 1 so you can get him back in game 4, and then you go Elder 1, Sale 2, and then you can get Sale back for game 5. Who knows? But the point is, those 3 guys right there for you can start a postseason series and be good. Now, do you need another guy with postseason caliber stuff? I'd argue yes. I don't think Martin Perez is that guy. I don't think anybody does. I don't think Grant Holmes profiles to be that guy as of now. He does make a start this week. We'll talk about that tomorrow when we preview the Cubs. Maybe he can get there. I do feel like, hopefully maybe Hurston Waldrop, when he comes back, has that caliber of stuff. Maybe you do get Spencer Schwellenbach. I would imagine we get an update on that tomorrow from the interview room before the game. But as of right now, you've got 3 postseason starters. Get them to the postseason healthy. See if you can find a 4th, either from your internal options who are coming back from injury. Maybe you think you can get J.R. Ritchie to a postseason caliber starter by the end of the year as far as finding more swing and miss. Maybe it's Didier Fuentes, and you can get him more comfortable with some of these other pitches, and you can keep his workload small enough where he can do it in the postseason. He can still be fresh when you get there. Who knows? But the point is, you've got a postseason caliber 1, 2, 3 right now. And you have until the trade deadline to figure out, can you find a 4th/injury backup here? We'll see what the Braves do. But that was my big takeaway coming out of the weekend. Yes, the offense did what they needed to do. They weren't reliant on homers in the entire series. It wasn't until Sunday they actually had a home run. And that game was not completely settled, but that game was already, I think they were up 4-0 when that first home run happened in the 8th inning. So it's not like they needed the home runs to stay in the game. That they were just insurance runs. But your rotation's where it needs to be. And you've got more reinforcements coming soon with Ha-Sung Kim potentially being back soon. We'll talk about that in just a minute right here on Braves Today. Hey Braves fans, if you've ever dreamt of going on the ultimate baseball road trip, this one's for you. Grand Slam Getaways offers bucket list baseball bus trips designed for fans who love the game and want to travel in style. All these trips depart from Atlanta via motor coach and include field-level tickets, 3-star hotels, daily breakfast, and a full slate of ballparks and other activities. Each trip includes at least 2 Braves road games, plus appearances by former MLB players, giveaways, and fun side trips to places like the Louisville Slugger Museum, the Bull Durham filming locations, and more. Whether you're retired, a baseball nut, or looking for a parent-child summer adventure, this is a stress-free way to hit the road with fellow fans. There are 2 remaining trips to choose from. June to the Midwest, which is closing soon, and July to the Northeast, all timed to match up with some Braves road games. So, reserve your spot now with a small deposit. Head to grandslam-getaways.com to make this summer a Grand Slam. Check it out now at grandslam-getaways.com to let the baseball adventure begin. Let's talk about some of the injuries that happened over the weekend, because none of these are in and of themselves anything that's going to meaningfully alter Atlanta's World Series odds. Braves Today sponsor FanDuel has the Braves as the 3rd best World Series odds in baseball at plus 1,100. Dodgers are at plus 190. Yankees are at plus 500. Braves are at plus 1,100. Next closest team in the National League is the Chicago Cubs, actually at plus 1,500. So Braves have second best NL odds. Then it's the Phillies, who have been pretty hot recently, but also despite being pretty hot, it's funny. The Phillies had one game at Miami, 3 against the Athletics, and 3 versus Colorado at home. At the same time, the Braves went to Seattle and LA to face the Dodgers. Atlanta got there with a 9.5 game lead. They left there with a 9 game lead. And like the Phillies had so much of an easier path than the Braves did. And all the Phillies could do was gain gain half a game, because Atlanta was able to handle business on the road trip overall, going 6-3. But some of these injuries could have repercussions down the line. And again, I'm not saying that they're going to meaningfully change the World Series odds, but they might change the way that you do things coming up soon. So 3 to talk about. First one is Eli White. I mentioned he made that catch in the 6th inning. For those of you who didn't see it, one, I put the footage on social media, both the Atlanta call and the LA call, because they were appropriately impressed by the quality of the catch. But Eli White, full extension, heading towards the wall, going up to get the ball, does not slow down or brace, face first into the wall. Just when you go and you look at the screen grab of him hitting the wall, you can't even see the features of his face because they're just crushed into the padding. He did complain a little bit later of his head hurting. He stayed in the game and took his at-bat the next half inning. But he did complain a little bit later of his head hurting, so he's in concussion protocol. He was walking around the clubhouse in LA on Sunday, was preparing to fly back with the team. And so the hope, this is just a hope, we don't know anything, the hope would be that he's gonna be fine. The fact that the lights clearly weren't bothering him, he was up and walking around and all of that, he's likely going to be fine, but we'll find out more for sure. The guy who replaced him, Mike Yastrzemski, took 94 to the helmet in the 9th inning. Now, you could tell that the Braves are dealing with some injuries because Yastrzemski was in there versus a lefty. Justin Wrobleski was still in the game in the 9th inning. But thankfully, this pitch looked like it grazed the shoulder first. And so it's possible that it took just enough away off of the fastball for Yastrzemski to not actually have taken the full brunt of 94 to the helmet. He said he felt okay. He finished out the game. There's no indication, at least that the Braves gave publicly, that he's going to need to go to concussion protocol or anything. So the Braves may have avoided injury there. If they lost both White and Yastrzemski, especially before Ronald Acuna Jr.'s due back later this week, it's going to get pretty dire when it comes to the outfield. Your outfield's going to be Michael Harris and probably you and me. That's going to be what the Braves have. Obviously, Mauricio Dubon could cover one of those spots. They would either have to play Jim Jarvis at shortstop and send Jorge Mateo out for the other one. Obviously, clearly, they'd make a roster move. They'd go grab an outfielder out of Gwinnett. I'd probably go with Brewer Hicklin or somebody, but they'd have to grab an outfielder out of Gwinnett, clearly. They probably do Luke Williams and one of the outfielders. And then you might be in a scenario where Mateo is in the outfield with Dubon and Harris, which offensively isn't quite what you're looking for, but defensively, if those are your left, center, and right field, holy cow, that's a defensive outfield. But we'll see what the update is on both White and Yastrzemski. I imagine tomorrow we'll get something there. The bigger concern, and I swear this dude is cursed, Danhausen got here. Danhausen apparently has not liked Sean Murphy for years. Sean Murphy was called for catcher's interference against shortstop Haesung Kim in the 8th. The swing clipped Murphy's glove at the time, what we thought. But it turns out it was not the glove, it was a finger. I'm assuming he does kind of like I did, where one of your fingers is coming out of the back of the glove to help kind of give you some stability on the outside. And so he was removed from the game. Dominic Smith took an at-bat for him late, and then Baldwin moved behind the plate. And Murphy got an X-ray. Walt Weiss said after the game that Weiss felt, that Murphy would be fine. But we're not going to officially get an update on his hand, his finger, whatever it was, until Tuesday. It's possible that they saw something, like they didn't see anything conclusive on the x-ray, but they want a higher resolution scan. The ones that are in ballparks maybe aren't necessarily as high quality as what you would get in like an independent imaging office, whatever. So it's possible that they didn't see anything on the scan, the initial scan, but they want more, or they want to see when he wakes up today, how sore he is. They want to get an MRI, something like that. We'll find out more on Tuesday. I swear, if you get Sean Murphy back for 2 games and then he goes on the IL again, it's just evidence that this dude is cursed. But that's kind of some of the injury issues there. And you can see like the benefit of this version of the Braves versus previous versions of the Braves is you can see how they have the depth to weather some of these things. I noticed between innings, Kyle Farmer's been coming out and warming up whatever pitcher is coming into the game that day. And so it's very clear that while Kyle Farmer remains on the roster for however long that is, one of the things they are thinking about is his status as the emergency catcher. If Murphy has to like miss a game, I imagine that is something where, okay, Kyle Farmer could be on the line. If Baldwin gets hurt, Farmer has to come in and finish out the game. But typically the way that Braves have handled catchers, other than like a weekend where they floated Sean Murphy in 2023, for the most part, if a guy is going to be unavailable for more than like one game, they go ahead and IL him just so that they can get another depth piece up. In this case, you'd be calling Gwinnett, and you would be working on, you'd probably be going with, I would imagine, Chadwick Tromp. You have Chadwick Tromp and you have Jair Camargo there. Reminder that Sandy Leon is no longer with the organization. He was released to go sign a foreign professional league deal. I don't remember off the top of my head where he went, if he went to Mexico or Japan, but Sandy Leon signed a deal to play professionally in a foreign league. So your 2 catchers in AAA, if I remember correctly, are Chadwick Tromp and Jair Camargo. So you'd call up Tromp, and then when Murphy's ready to come back, you would have to DFA Chadwick Tromp. Maybe he re-signs with you, maybe he doesn't. Like that's one of the things that you have to deal with catchers. The Braves like to carry as much veteran catcher depth as they can, and right now he's the only real guy in the system that is veteran catcher depth. So we'll find out again. We'll find out on Tuesday in the interview room before the game what's going on there. In the meantime, we will preview that matchup on Tuesday before the game. I do want to give you a quick heads up, a quick programming note. My intention's to have an extra show on Monday afternoon. We got the email this morning right before I sat down to record with the Atlanta Braves Holdings announcing their Q1 financial results. Baseball revenue up 60%, mixed-use development revenue up 41%, broadcasting revenue was down as part of the transition from Main Street Sports Group to Braves Vision. This was expected. They warned us about this when we had the year-end financial results back in February, I think it's when it was, because they're going from scheduled payments from Main Street Sports Group to collecting on their own, and the terms for advertising, they have not done very many of those collections yet. So I'm going to break all of that down on a separate podcast this afternoon, as well as a newsletter over at bravestoday.com. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.